In the year 2387, humanity had spread across the stars, building colonies on distant planets and forming alliances with friendly alien species. This collection of worlds was known as the Galactic Coalition. For many years, peace had allowed trade and culture to flourish between different worlds. But that peace was ending. The Zorthal Empire, a race of tall, gray-skinned aliens with 4 arms and yellow eyes, had begun attacking Coalition worlds one by one. They showed no mercy, taking what they wanted and destroying everything else. Their ships were faster, their weapons were stronger, and their shields could block almost any attack. At Coalition headquarters on New Terra, Admiral Frank Miller stared out of the huge window in his office. The blue-green planet below reminded him of old Earth, humanity's birthplace, now just a distant memory. His gray hair was cut short, and deep lines marked his face from years of worry. Today, those lines seemed deeper than ever. "Sir, the reports from the Centauri sector are in," said his aide, handing him a small datapad. Frank looked at the screen and felt his heart sink. 3 more colony worlds lost in just 2 days, thousands dead, millions running for their lives. The Coalition fleet had fought bravely, but they were simply outmatched. "Call an emergency meeting," Frank ordered. "All available council members and fleet commanders. 1 hour. 55 minutes later, Frank walked into the large round meeting room at the heart of headquarters. The faces around the table were grim. Some joined by hologram, their blue, flickering forms showing the strain of battle even across the vast distances of space. "The situation is worse than we feared," Frank began, not bothering with formalities. "At our current rate of losses, the Zorthal will reach Earth's solar system in less than 2 weeks. Our best ships and weapons are barely slowing them down." General Peter Clark, head of Coalition ground forces, slammed his fist on the table. "We need more ships, more weapons. We can't just surrender the heart of human civilization." "We're building as fast as we can," replied Admiral Susan Lynn, in charge of production. "But it takes time we don't have." As the shouting grew louder, a young woman with curly brown hair stood up from her seat at the far end of the table. No one noticed her at first. She wasn't part of the senior command. Lieutenant Olivia West worked in the Historical Records Division, and normally wouldn't even be at such a high-level meeting. But today, as the junior officer on duty, she had been sent to represent her department. "Excuse me," she said, her voice lost in the argument. Captain Sam Richards, commander of the destroyer Vigilant, noticed her first. He was younger than most of the other officers, in his late 30s, with kind blue eyes and a reputation for listening to his crew. "Quiet," he called out. "Someone is trying to speak." The room gradually fell silent. All eyes turned to Olivia, who suddenly wished she hadn't stood up. I may have found something that could help us," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "In the historical archives," General Clark rolled his eyes. "We don't have time for history lessons, Lieutenant." "Please, sir. It's about a ship, a warship from the early days of space exploration. It was called the USS Dauntless." Frank Miller leaned forward. "I've never heard of it." "Few people have, sir. Most of the records were classified or lost. But I've been piecing together fragments for my doctoral thesis on early FTL technology." Olivia tapped on her datapad, and a hologram appeared in the center of the table. It showed an old ship design unlike anything in the current fleet. Longer and more elegant than modern vessels, with smooth lines and unusual projections that didn't match any known weapon system. The Dauntless was built in secret around 2195 as an experimental testbed for technologies considered too dangerous or unstable for regular use, Olivia explained. It had capabilities we still can't replicate today. "What happened to it?" Captain Richards asked. "It disappeared during a classified test jump almost 2 centuries ago, but according to my research, it wasn't destroyed." Olivia took a deep breath. "It was hidden. Deliberately." Laughter broke out around the table. Admiral Lynn shook her head. "Lieutenant, I appreciate your creativity, but we need real solutions, not fairy tales." "It's not a fairy tale," Olivia insisted. The ship's experimental quantum fold drive created an unexpected effect. It could phase between dimensions. The captain, Elizabeth Hammond, made the decision to remove the Dauntless from normal space until humanity was ready for its power. General, Clark stood up, his face red with anger. This is absurd. We're facing extinction and you're telling us ghost stories about a magic ship that can save us all? Not magic, sir. Science we don't yet understand, Olivia replied calmly. Frank Miller raised his hand for quiet. Lieutenant West, while your research sounds fascinating, I don't see how a missing ship from 2 centuries ago helps our current situation. Because I believe I've found a way to call it back, Olivia said. A recall protocol hidden in the old archives. The room erupted again, most voices dismissive or angry. Frank Miller called for order, then said gently, Lieutenant, I think it's best if you return to your regular duties. We need to focus on practical defense strategies. Olivia gathered her things, face burning with embarrassment. As she headed for the door, she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Captain Richards. I'd like to hear more, he said quietly. Meet me in my office in 30 minutes. Half an hour later, Olivia sat across from Captain Richards in his small office aboard the space station. Unlike the grand meeting room, this space was practical and lived in, with actual paper books on a shelf and photos of his crew displayed on the walls. Tell me everything, he said. Olivia opened her files and began showing him the evidence she'd collected. Old mission logs, technical specifications, personal journals from engineers who worked on the project. The Dauntless wasn't just advanced, she explained. It represented a completely different path of technological development. Instead of brute force, it used the fabric of space-time itself as both weapon and shield. But the power it controlled was considered too dangerous. After a test went wrong and nearly destroyed a moon, Captain Hammond made a choice. She showed him a personal log entry, the words of Elizabeth Hammond preserved across time. What we've created is too powerful for where humanity stands today. We've opened a door we're not ready to walk through. Until we mature as a species, until we can be trusted with this kind of power, the Dauntless will remain beyond reach. You really believe this ship is out there somewhere? After all this time, Richards asked. I do, and I think Captain Hammond left a way for us to call it back in times of true need. Olivia pulled up another file. This is what I believe is a recall protocol, disguised as a routine maintenance procedure. But it requires specialized equipment to broadcast on frequencies we don't use anymore. Richards was silent for a long moment, studying the information. The Vigilant had just returned from the front lines, where he had watched good ships and good people die against the unstoppable Zorthol forces. What do we have to lose? He finally said. If you're wrong, we're no worse off than we are now. If you're right. He didn't finish the sentence. There's a research station on Luna that might have the equipment we need, Olivia suggested. It houses some of our oldest communication arrays. Captain Richards stood up. I still have some favors I can call in. Pack whatever you need, Lieutenant. We leave in 2 hours. As Olivia rushed back to her quarters, her heart pounded with a mix of fear and hope. The Dauntless had been her obsession for years, a historical mystery to solve. Now it might be humanity's last chance for survival. If the ship was real, if it could be called back, if it was as powerful as the record suggested. Those were a lot of ifs. But as the reports of Zorthol attacks continued to flood in, ifs were all humanity had left. The trip to Luna took only a few hours. Captain Richards used his authority to get a small transport ship, avoiding questions from his superiors. Olivia spent the journey reviewing her research and wondering if she was sending them on a wild goose chase. The Luna Research Station was built into the side of a crater. Once a busy center for communication research, it now stood nearly empty, with most of its staff reassigned to defense projects. An old man with a white beard met them at the airlock. Dr. Paul Baker, he said, shaking their hands. Station manager. Not that there's much to manage these days. What brings a starship captain all the way to this old place? Richards introduced Olivia. Lieutenant West has a project that might help with our current situation. We need access to your oldest communication arrays. Dr. Baker raised his eyebrows. Those old things? They haven't been used in decades. I'm not even sure they still work. We need to try, Olivia said. Dr. Baker led them through dim hallways, to a large circular room filled with outdated equipment. Dust covered most surfaces. The main control panel looked like something from a museum. This is it, Dr. Baker said. The original Deep Space Communication Center, built before we had faster-than-light communication. I can give you access, but you'll need an engineer if you want to actually use any of this. Richards nodded. I brought one. He should be arriving shortly. An hour later, Chief Engineer Alan Diaz arrived with 2 junior officers, Kevin Jones and Maya Garcia. Diaz was a stocky man in his 50s with dark hair streaked with gray and hands rough from decades of fixing ships. Captain, he said to Richards, this better be important. I was in the middle of repairs on the Vigilant. Richards explained their mission. Diaz listened with growing disbelief. You want me to get these ancient machines working so we can call a mythical ship from another dimension? He asked when Richards finished. Sir, with all due respect, have you lost your mind? Possibly, Richards admitted, but we're out of options. The Zorthal broke through another defense line this morning. We have maybe 3 days before they reach Sol. Diaz looked around the dusty room and sighed. This tech belongs in a museum, not a battlefield. But he started examining the equipment anyway. Garcia, check the power systems. Jones, help me with these panels. While Diaz and his team worked, Olivia set up her data and prepared the recall protocol. The more she reviewed it, the more she realized how complex it was. It's not just a signal, she explained to Richards as they watched the engineers work. It's more like a promise. The protocol is encrypted with what I believe is a moral key based on humanity's core values. A moral key? Richards asked. Yes. From what I can tell, the Dauntless won't return unless it's convinced we're calling it for the right reasons. Captain Hammond was concerned about the ship's power being misused. Jones, who was helping Diaz open a panel, spoke up. My grandfather used to tell stories about the Dauntless. I always thought they were just bedtime tales to make me dream of the stars. What kind of stories? Olivia asked, curious. That it could move between stars in the blink of an eye. That it could make itself invisible. That it fought an enemy so terrible they had to be erased from history. Jones shrugged. Kid stuff. I never thought there might be truth to it. Diaz grunted as he pulled out a tangle of old wires. Don't encourage her. We're wasting precious time that could be spent on real defenses. For the next 48 hours, they worked non-stop. Diaz proved his reputation as a miracle worker, coaxing life back into systems that hadn't operated in generations. Garcia found ways to connect modern power sources to the old machinery. Jones discovered old manuals that helped them recalibrate the transmission arrays, but nothing worked. Every attempt to broadcast the recall protocol failed. Equipment broke down, power fluctuated, and there was no response from the void. We need to face facts, Diaz said, as another attempt failed. Either this ship doesn't exist, or it doesn't want to be found. They were all exhausted, running on stimulants and little sleep. Even Olivia was beginning to doubt. Then her datapad beeped with an incoming message. Her face went pale as she read it. The outer defense line has fallen, she told the others. The Zorthal Vanguard will reach Neptune's orbit in less than 12 hours. The coalition is moving, every remaining ship to intercept, but she didn't need to finish. They all knew what it meant. The coalition's last battle group was moving to a fight they couldn't win. Richards put a hand on her shoulder. One more try, then we head back and join the defense. Olivia nodded and turned back to her work. Something was missing. The protocol was technically correct, but it wasn't working. What had she overlooked? She thought about Captain Hammond's words from the log, about humanity needing to mature, about trust, about power and responsibility. I've been approaching this wrong, she said suddenly. The protocol isn't just a technical signal. It's a message from our time to theirs. It needs to show that we understand what the Dauntless represents. And what does it represent? Garcia asked. A choice, Olivia said. The power to destroy or the power to protect. Captain Hammond chose protection even if it meant hiding the ship away until we were ready. She began to rewrite the transmission. Instead of just the technical protocol, she added a message explaining their situation, the Zorthal threat, the innocent lives at stake across the galaxy, humanity's struggle not for power or conquest, but for survival and the right to determine its own future. As she worked, the station's lights flickered and dimmed. Emergency power kicked in, casting the room in a red glow. "What happened?" Richards asked. Dr. Baker rushed in, looking worried. "The Zorthal have destroyed the power relay satellites. We're on backup generators now." Diaz checked his equipment. "We have maybe 30 minutes of power left. After that, we're dead in the water." Richards turned to Olivia. "Is it ready?" She nodded. "As ready as it will ever be." The modified communication array hummed to life one last time. Olivia's message, wrapped in the complex recall protocol, beamed out into space. The room was silent except for the sound of the old machines working. Everyone watched the main screen, hoping for some response. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. "I'm sorry," Olivia said finally. "I really thought—" Diaz shook his head. "It was worth trying, kid." They began shutting down the equipment, preparing to leave. The battle for humanity would be fought with the ships they had, not with myths and legends. Then, just as Olivia was packing up her datapad, all their systems went crazy. Alarms blared. Sensors that hadn't been used in decades suddenly came to life. "What's happening?" Richards demanded. Dr. Baker stared at the readings in disbelief. "Something's out there, beyond Neptune's orbit. It's creating some kind of spatial distortion." On the main screen, a visual feed from one of Luna's old observation telescopes showed a patch of space beginning to ripple and fold. Stars seemed to bend around a growing distortion. "Is it the Zorthal?" Garcia asked, fear in her voice. "No," Olivia whispered, hope rising in her chest. "It's an answer." The distortion grew larger, creating a shimmering breach in the fabric of space itself. And through that breach, something massive was emerging, something that shouldn't exist. Something that had been hidden away for almost 2 centuries. The USS Dauntless had returned. Chaos erupted at Coalition headquarters as automated defense systems detected an unknown vessel materializing in the outer solar system. Officers rushed to battle stations, thinking it was another Zorthal attack. "What are we looking at?" "Admiral," Miller demanded, staring at the main screen in the command center. A young sensor operator shook her head in confusion. "I don't know, sir. It's not Zorthal. The configuration is human, but it matches nothing in our database." "Size comparison?" Miller asked. "It's massive, sir. At least 3 times larger than our biggest battleship." The room fell silent as an image appeared on screen. The ship was unlike anything they had ever seen, long and elegant with smooth lines that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. No visible weapons could be seen, yet somehow it projected an unmistakable sense of power. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the unknown vessel." "Put it through," Miller ordered. The main screen flickered, and a woman's face appeared. She wore an antique uniform that hadn't been used in centuries. Her face was youthful, with short blonde hair and clear blue eyes that held a depth of experience at odds with her apparent age. "This is Captain Elizabeth Hammond of the USS Dauntless," she said. "We received your signal and have verified its authenticity. The Dauntless has returned to fulfill its purpose, the defense of humanity." Miller was speechless for a moment. Then he found his voice. "This is Admiral Frank Miller of the Galactic Coalition. Captain Hammond, according to our records, you've been missing for almost 200 years. Hammond smiled slightly. "For us, it's been only 20 years, Admiral. Time flows differently in the spaces between dimensions." Before Miller could respond, another officer rushed in. "Sir, the Zorthal fleet has engaged our forces near Neptune. We're taking heavy losses." Hammond's expression grew serious. "Brief me on the current situation, Admiral, then point us toward the enemy. Back on Luna, Olivia, Richards, and the others watched in amazement as the Dauntless moved away from Earth, heading toward the battle. They had returned to the station's main observation room, where they could monitor what was happening. "I can't believe it worked," Diaz said, shaking his head. "The ship actually exists." "We need to get back to headquarters," Richards said. "They'll need every detail we have about the Dauntless." As they prepared to leave, Richards's communicator beeped. It was Admiral Miller. "Captain Richards, I understand you're with Lieutenant West," Miller said, his voice tense but controlled. "I've just had a very interesting conversation with someone claiming to be Captain Elizabeth Hammond of a ship called the Dauntless." "It's real, sir," Richards confirmed. "The lieutenant's research was correct." "So I see," Miller replied. "Captain Hammond has requested that you and Lieutenant West join her on the Dauntless. A shuttle will be sent to retrieve you." Olivia's heart raced. Join the crew of the Dauntless? It seemed impossible. "What about the others, sir?" Richards asked, looking at Diaz, Jones, and Garcia. "Bring Chief Diaz as well," Miller said. "We need someone who can make sense of the technology. The others should return to headquarters for debriefing." An hour later, a shuttle unlike anything they had ever seen docked at Luna Station. It had no visible engines, yet moved with impossible grace. The pilot who greeted them wore the same antique uniform as Captain Hammond. Lieutenant Commander Greg Foster. He introduced himself. "Welcome aboard." The interior of the shuttle was both familiar and strange. The basic layout resembled Coalition designs, but the materials and technology were clearly advanced beyond anything they knew. "How does it fly?" Diaz asked, unable to contain his curiosity. "The shuttle manipulates gravitational fields," Foster explained. "No conventional engines needed." The trip to the Dauntless took less than 10 minutes despite the vast distance. As they approached, they got their first close look at the legendary ship. It was breathtaking. The hull seemed to shift slightly as they watched, as if it wasn't entirely solid. "Is it changing?" Olivia asked. Foster nodded. "The hull is adaptive. It can alter its properties as needed." They docked in a bay that could have held several Coalition cruisers. Inside, they were met by a woman they recognized from the transmission, Captain Elizabeth Hammond herself. "Welcome aboard the Dauntless," she said. "Lieutenant West, your message was quite moving. It seems humanity still faces existential threats even after all this time." "Thank you for answering, Captain," Olivia replied, feeling strangely calm despite the surreal situation. "We had almost lost hope." "Hope is a powerful thing," Hammond said. "Now follow me, we don't have much time." She led them through corridors that seemed to extend impossibly far. The interior of the Dauntless was a perfect blend of advanced technology and historical preservation. Some areas looked like they belonged in a museum of early spaceflight. Others contained technology so advanced it seemed magical. "The ship has been evolving during our time away," Hammond explained as they walked. "We've had 2 decades to learn, grow, and improve our systems." 20 years? Richards asked. "But you've been gone for almost 2 centuries. "Relativity effects," Hammond said. "Time moves differently in the spaces between dimensions. For us, it's been just 20 years of subjective time." They entered a vast chamber that could only be the bridge. It was arranged in concentric circles, with various crew members working, at stations that had no visible controls, just shimmering fields of light that responded to their touch. "What exactly have you been doing for 20 years?" Diaz asked. "Watching, learning, growing." Hammond gestured toward a large spherical display in the center of the bridge. It showed the solar system, with the Coalition and Zorthol fleets engaged near Neptune, and preparing for this moment. "We knew we would be needed again someday." "How did you know?" Olivia asked. "Because that's why we left," Hammond said simply. "The Dauntless was never meant to be gone forever, just until humanity was ready, or until humanity was facing extinction." Your message indicated the latter. Crew member approached Hammond. "Captain, we're approaching the battlefield. Zorthol vessels are detected." "Thank you, Commander," Hammond said. She turned to her guests. "You should see this." The spherical display zoomed in on the battle. The coalition fleet was fighting bravely, but they were clearly outmatched. Several ships were already destroyed, and others were heavily damaged. Zorthal ships were massive, gray vessels shaped like arrowheads with strange purple energy flowing around them. At the center of their formation was an enormous ship that dwarfed the others. Their flagship, Richard said grimly. It's a world killer, capable of destroying an entire planet. Hammond studied the display. I see they've prepared to fire their main weapon at Earth. She sat in a command chair at the center of the bridge. Battle stations, prepare for dimensional shift, target the Zorthal flagship. The crew moved with practiced efficiency. The lights on the bridge dimmed slightly and a subtle vibration ran through the floor. What's happening? Olivia asked. We're about to show the Zorthal something they've never seen before, Hammond said. Her eyes were focused on the display, where the Dauntless was now represented by a blue point of light approaching the battle. Lieutenant West, Captain Richards, Chief Diaz, you might want to hold on to something. The first shift can be disorienting. Before any of them could ask what she meant, the universe seemed to twist around them. For a brief, stomach-churning moment, Olivia felt like she was everywhere and nowhere at once. Then reality snapped back into focus. On the display, the Dauntless had instantly moved from the edge of the battle to a position directly in front of the Zorthal flagship. How did we? Richards began. Dimensional shift, Hammond explained calmly. We didn't move through space. We moved between spaces. A crew member called out, Captain, the Zorthal are firing. Hammond nodded. As expected. Let's show them what the Dauntless can really do. Open a channel to their commander. Let's give them one chance to retreat. The display changed to show the face of a Zorthal, gray-skinned, with 4 yellow eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern. It spoke in a harsh, clicking language that was automatically translated. Human vessel, you will be destroyed. Your species will serve the Empire or be eliminated. Hammond's expression didn't change. So be it, she said quietly. Close channel. Begin defense procedures. The battle was about to begin. The Zorthal flagship fired its main weapon. A beam of purple energy, powerful enough to crack a planet's crust, shot toward the Dauntless. Olivia held her breath, expecting destruction. But the beam simply disappeared as it touched the Dauntless hull. What just happened? She asked, amazed. We shifted the energy to another dimension, Hammond explained calmly. The Dauntless doesn't just travel between dimensions, it can selectively move matter and energy between them as well. The Zorthal ships fired again and again. Each blast was absorbed or redirected. On the display, Olivia could see the confusion spreading through the enemy fleet as their most powerful weapons had no effect. Are we going to fire back? Richards asked. Hammond shook her head. The Dauntless doesn't use conventional weapons. They cause too much collateral damage. She turned to her weapons officer. Begin containment procedures on the smaller vessels. Use compression fields on the outer groups. The crew worked their control panels. Outside, the space around several Zorthal ships began to warp and bend. Some ships were suddenly surrounded by shimmering bubbles of energy that trapped them completely. Others seemed to fold in on themselves, growing smaller and smaller until they were no bigger than toy models. What are you doing to them? Diaz asked, his engineer's mind struggling to understand. Some ships are being partially phased out of normal space, Hammond said. They're trapped between dimensions, unable to move or fire weapons. Others are experiencing localized space compression, which reduces their physical size without harming the crew. The Zorthal flagship tried to retreat, but the Dauntless moved with impossible speed to block its path. They're powering up their jump drive, a crew member reported. Disable it, Hammond ordered, then open a channel. A wave of energy pulsed from the Dauntless. The Zorthal ship's engines flickered and died. The alien commander appeared on screen, again its yellow eyes wide with what might have been fear. What are you? It demanded. We are humanity's guardians, Hammond replied. Your fleet is neutralized. Your weapons are useless against us. You have a choice. Surrender and agree to peace talks with the coalition or be permanently contained. The Zorthal was silent for a long moment. Then it lowered its head in a gesture of submission. "We surrender." In less than 15 minutes, the battle was over. The mighty Zorthul fleet had been defeated without a single additional coalition casualty. The ships that hadn't been compressed or phased out of space were now drifting powerless, their crews unable to do anything but wait for coalition forces to board them. Admiral Miller's face appeared on the main screen, his expression a mixture of awe and relief. "Captain Hammond, I don't know how to thank you. You've saved not just Earth, but the entire coalition." "We did what we were built to do, Admiral," Hammond replied. "The Dauntless was always meant to be humanity's shield, in its darkest hour." Miller straightened his uniform. "I'm organizing a delegation to formally welcome you home. The Coalition Council wants to meet with you as soon as possible. There's so much we can learn from you. Weapons, defenses, faster-than-light travel." Shadow passed over Hammond's face. "Admiral, I should make something clear. The Dauntless isn't a weapon to be studied and copied. We're a safeguard, a last resort. Humanity must still chart its own course." Miller looked disappointed but nodded. "I understand. Still, any assistance you can provide would be invaluable." "We'll discuss it when you arrive," Hammond said diplomatically. After the communication ended, Hammond turned to her guests. "And now you see why we left. The temptation to use our technology as weapons would be too great." "But you just used it as a weapon," Richards pointed out. "No," Hammond corrected him. "We used it to contain and neutralize without destruction. There's a difference. The Dauntless could have destroyed the entire Zorthul fleet in seconds, but that's not our purpose." 3 days later, a formal reception was held aboard the Dauntless. Admiral Miller led a delegation of coalition officials, scientists, and military officers. They marveled at the ship's technology and pressed Hammond with endless questions. Olivia watched from a corner, feeling strangely sad. The myth had become real, but somehow it felt less magical now that everyone was talking about studying it and replicating its technology. Hammond found her there and smiled. "You look troubled, Lieutenant." "I spent years researching the Dauntless," Olivia explained. "I believed in it when no one else did, but now I'm worried about what will happen next. Will the Coalition try to use your technology to build more ships like this?" "That's a valid concern," Hammond said. "Which is why I've made a decision. The Dauntless will remain at the edge of the solar system for 1 year. During that time, we will share certain aspects of our technology, but only those that will help rebuild and defend without upsetting the balance of power. And after a year, we'll leave again, but not forever." Hammond put a hand on Olivia's shoulder. "I'm appointing you as the official historian for what we're calling the Dauntless Integration Project. You'll document what we share and what we don't, and why." Olivia was stunned. "Me? But I'm just a junior archivist." "You're the one who found us," Hammond said. "You understood what the Dauntless represents. That makes you the perfect choice." The year passed quickly. The Zorthul Empire, humbled by their defeat, signed a peace treaty with the Coalition. The technologies shared by the Dauntless revolutionized medicine, energy production, and environmental restoration. Captain Hammond had deliberately chosen to share knowledge that would improve lives rather than take them. Olivia spent much of her time interviewing the crew and documenting their stories. One question burned in her mind, and finally, a week before the Dauntless was scheduled to depart, she worked up the courage to ask Hammond directly. "Where have you been all this time?" she asked during a private interview in Hammond's quarters. Hammond smiled. "We've been in the spaces between possibilities, Lieutenant. There are more dimensions to existence than humanity has yet discovered, and greater threats than the Zorthul lurking in the dark between stars. We've been learning, preparing." "Preparing for what?" Olivia asked. "For the day humanity joins us among the stars, not just as explorers or colonizers, but as guardians of something precious and rare in this universe. Compassion combined with determination." On the day the Dauntless prepared to leave, a small ceremony was held on the bridge. Captain Richards, now promoted to admiral for his role in finding the legendary ship, was invited by Hammond to a private conversation. "This isn't goodbye," she told him. "The Dauntless will always answer when humanity faces extinction. But our hope is that what we've shared will help you build a civilization that never needs to call us again." Richards nodded, understanding. "Safe travels, Captain Hammond, and thank you." The Dauntless began to shimmer, its edges becoming blurry as it prepared to shift between dimensions. Those watching from nearby ships said it looked like the most beautiful sunrise they had ever seen, spreading across the stars before fading gently away. A month later, Olivia found a strange device in her quarters with a single message. "For when you're ready to see beyond." The invitation was clear. Humanity's journey was just beginning. The Dauntless had returned to myth. But this time, the myth had purpose. It wasn't just a story of a powerful warship that had once existed. It was a promise that humanity would never face the darkness alone. And for Olivia, it was something more. A door to adventures beyond imagination, waiting for the day she would be ready to step through.